Break the comfort zone. Most people believe comfort is the reward for hard work. But the truth is, comfort can be the slowest, quietest prison you'll ever live in. You don't see the bars, yet they hold you. You don't feel the chains, yet they pull you back every time you try to move forward. This audiobook is not about making you slightly better. It's about breaking those invisible walls for good. Because the life you dream of is not found inside the zone you know. It begins the moment you dare to step beyond it. Chapter 1. The Cage You Can't See. Imagine a bird born in a golden cage. It has never felt the wind beneath its wings, never tasted the thrill of flying high over valleys and rivers. The bird believes the cage is the world. And here's the twist. You and I are that bird more often than we realize. The difference? Our cage isn't made of metal. It's built from habits, fears, and beliefs so familiar that we stop questioning them. We think of comfort zones as cozy places, our routines, our familiar skills, our safe environments. But what we don't realize is that these zones can be camouflaged prisons. They don't keep us from breathing. They keep us from truly living. When you stay too long in your comfort zone, you begin to accept less than you're capable of. You start convincing yourself that what you have is all there is. Here's the dangerous part. Comfort zones don't feel dangerous. There's no alarm bell, no warning sign. You simply wake up one day and realize that years have passed and nothing much has changed. The dreams you once had are still dreams. The life you imagined for yourself remains an idea instead of a reality. Think about how many times you've avoided an opportunity because it felt too risky. Maybe you wanted to start a side business, learn a new skill, move to a new city, or speak up in a meeting. But then a voice whispered, "What if you fail? What if it's uncomfortable?" That voice is the warden of your invisible cage. Breaking out begins with awareness. You can't fight an enemy you can't see, and you can't escape a prison you don't acknowledge. The first step is identifying the walls around you. These walls are not physical, they're made of patterns. Fear of uncertainty. You cling to the known because it feels safe, even if it's unsatisfying. Fear of judgment. You choose not to try because you're worried about what others will think. Fear of discomfort. You avoid struggle, not realizing that struggle is the path to growth. Self-doubt. You believe you're not ready, not good enough, or not capable. Here's a relatable truth. Most people don't live to their potential not because they lack talent, but because they lack courage to leave what's familiar. They trade possibilities for predictability. Consider this. A friend of mine worked at the same job for 12 years. He was good at it, respected, and comfortable. But every time we talked, I could hear the frustration under his words. He had ideas for a business, dreams of traveling, and the skills to make it happen. But he kept saying, maybe next year, when things settle down. They never settled down. Life doesn't. It took a company layoff to finally force him into the unknown. And guess what? Within a year, he built a business he loved. He said to me, "I wish I'd done this years ago." The cage had been open all along. He just didn't walk out. You might be thinking, but my situation is different. And yes, every life is unique, but the principle is the same. The comfort zone is built by your mind and maintained by your habits. The exit is always there, it's just hidden by excuses. If you want to see the invisible cage, pay attention to your daily patterns. Ask yourself, what am I avoiding because it feels uncomfortable? Where am I choosing the easy path instead of the meaningful one? What have I been saying someday to for years? And here's something important. Breaking out doesn't always mean quitting your job or moving across the world. It starts with small, intentional discomforts. Speaking up when you usually stay quiet. Learning something that challenges you. Saying yes to something that scares you just a little. Each small step weakens the bars until one day, they no longer hold you. The comfort zone is seductive. It whispers, "Stay here, you're safe." But safety is often the enemy of greatness. If you keep choosing comfort, you might wake up with a life that is comfortable but deeply unfulfilled, and that is a far greater risk than the discomfort of growth. Recognizing the cage is the beginning. In the next chapters, we'll talk about exactly how to break it and build a life that challenges, excites, and expands you. But remember this: your cage is only as strong as your belief in it. The moment you see it for what it is, you've already begun to break it. Chapter 2. The price of playing safe. When most people think about playing it safe, they imagine avoiding disaster. They think it means staying away from risk, failure, or embarrassment. On the surface, it feels like a wise choice. Why walk into the storm when you can stay indoors? But here's the problem. Safety is never free. Every time you choose comfort over challenge, you're paying a price. The only difference is, that price isn't charged in dollars. It's charged in potential, passion, and time you can't get back. Think of it like this. Comfort charges interest. You don't notice the cost at first because it's quiet, almost invisible. You still get your paycheck, you still get by, and nothing feels broken. But over time, the hidden bill starts to grow. You start to lose the hunger you once had. Your skills stop evolving. Opportunities pass without you even realizing they were there. And one day, you realize the biggest cost of all. You're living a life that's far smaller than it could be. Here's what playing safe can cost you. Missed opportunities. You never know how many doors could have opened if you'd taken that one step forward. That promotion you didn't apply for. That idea you didn't pitch. That connection you didn't make. Safety often means saying no to the very moments that could have changed everything. Stagnation. The world keeps moving. Industries change, skills become outdated, and new challenges emerge. If you stay where you are for too long, you don't just remain the same, you actually fall behind. Dullness of spirit. Humans are wired for growth. When you stop challenging yourself, life starts to feel repetitive. The excitement you once had fades into a quiet resignation, and you start convincing yourself that this is just how life is. Regret. Not the kind that comes from failure, but the kind that comes from wondering what could have been. Studies show that in the long run, people regret inaction far more than mistakes. Playing it safe may protect you from pain today, but it leaves you vulnerable to the heavier pain of what if later. Let me share a story. Years ago, I met a man in his 60s at a seminar. We got to talking about dreams and ambitions, and he told me something that hit hard. In his 20s, he had an offer to join a friend's small tech company. He turned it down because it felt too risky, choosing instead to stay in a steady government job. Decades later, his friend's company was worth hundreds of millions. He wasn't bitter about the money. What haunted him was wondering who he might have become if he'd said yes. He said, "The hardest part is knowing I'll never know." The truth is, avoiding risk doesn't mean avoiding loss. It often just means trading one kind of loss for another. You might avoid failure, but you also avoid growth. You might avoid rejection, but you also avoid deep connections. You might avoid uncertainty, but you also avoid the thrill of discovering what you're truly capable of. When you play safe, you make decisions from fear, not possibility. You focus on what you could lose instead of what you might gain. And over time, that mindset shapes your entire life. You start shrinking your world to fit the limits of your courage, instead of expanding your courage to fit the size of your dreams. The irony is, risk itself is unavoidable. Life will hand you challenges whether you invite them or not. Health changes, industries collapse, relationships shift, and unexpected storms arrive. If you've spent your life avoiding discomfort, you'll be unprepared when discomfort finds you. But if you've trained yourself to face it, to step outside the familiar, you'll be ready, not just to survive, but to adapt and thrive. The question you have to ask yourself is this: am I living to protect what I have, or to discover what I could have? The first path leads to safety, but safety without growth is just slow decay. The second path might be scarier, but it's also where the fullness of life exists. Chapter 3. Fear, your greatest GPS. Fear gets a bad reputation. Most people see it as a warning sign to stop, turn back, or stay put. We're taught from a young age that fear means danger, that it's something to avoid at all costs. But here's the truth. Fear is not always a red light. Sometimes it's a green one. In fact, fear can be the most accurate compass you'll ever have. Think about it. The things you're most afraid of often point directly to the places where you can grow the most. You're afraid to speak on stage because deep down, you know being heard matters to you. You're afraid to start that business because your dream is tied to it. You're afraid to have that difficult conversation because the relationship matters enough to risk discomfort. Fear doesn't just appear randomly. It shows up where something meaningful is at stake. The problem is, most people misinterpret fear's role. They see it as a guard, standing in front of the gate to keep them out. They don't realize it's also a guide, pointing them toward the very gate they need to walk through. If you treat fear only as a stop sign, you'll miss the path to your biggest breakthroughs. Let's break this down into how fear can guide you. Fear reveals your values. If something scares you, it's often because it matters to you. Pay attention to what you fear. It's often a map to what you care about most. Fear points to growth zones. The things you've mastered rarely scare you anymore. Fear shows up at the edges of your current abilities, signaling where you have the most potential to expand. Fear creates energy. That racing heart, that surge of adrenaline, that's your body preparing you to act. Fear can be fuel if you channel it into movement instead of paralysis. Here's a story that changed how I see fear. A young woman I coached wanted to become a photographer, but she was terrified to put her work online. What if people hate it? What if no one likes it? She asked. I told her, if your work didn't matter to you, you wouldn't feel this fear. This fear is proof that you care. And if you care, it's worth doing, especially because you're afraid. She started sharing her photos one by one. Within a year, she had a growing client list and a portfolio she was proud of. Fear didn't disappear. It just stopped being the driver. Now, let's be clear. Fear can also signal real danger. The goal isn't to ignore it blindly, but to separate life-threatening fear from life-expanding fear. One keeps you alive. The other makes you come alive. The trick is asking, is this fear protecting me from harm or just protecting me from growth? Most of the time, if you're honest, you'll find it's the second one. Here's the mindset shift that changes everything. Fear is not the enemy of courage. It's the raw material of courage. Without fear, there is no courage, only comfort. When you see fear as a GPS instead of a guard, you stop avoiding it and start following it. From now on, when you feel fear, don't just retreat. Pause and notice. What is it pointing you toward? What would happen if, instead of running from it, you took one small step in its direction? Each time you do, you teach your brain that fear is not a wall, it's a doorway. Small leaps, big shifts. When people think about breaking the comfort zone, they imagine giant, dramatic moves. Quitting their job overnight, selling everything, moving to another country. And while those stories make for exciting headlines, they're rarely how lasting transformation actually happens. In real life, sustainable change is built on something far less glamorous, but far more powerful. Small, consistent leaps. These are the calculated, manageable risks you take regularly. The ones that don't overwhelm your system but still stretch it. The ones that don't throw you into chaos but nudge you out of autopilot. Small leaps are the training ground for bigger courage. They build momentum, skill, and confidence, 3 things you'll need when life inevitably presents you with bigger opportunities or challenges. Why are small leaps so effective? First, they lower the psychological resistance. If you've never run before, sprinting a marathon tomorrow will break you. But running for 5 minutes today is doable. Fear thrives on overwhelm. When you make the step small enough, you bypass fear's grip while still making progress. Second, they compound. One small leap might not seem like much, but stacked over time, they create massive shifts. The habit of stretching yourself becomes part of your identity. What once terrified you becomes second nature, and your definition of possible keeps expanding. Third, small leaps give you feedback without catastrophic failure. If something doesn't work, you can course correct quickly. You don't have to recover from a massive crash. You just take another small step in a different direction. Here's an example. A man I knew wanted to become a public speaker but froze at the thought of talking to large audiences. Instead of aiming for a TED Talk right away, he started speaking to just 2 colleagues at work about a topic he cared about. Then he volunteered to introduce a guest at a company meeting. A few months later, he ran a short workshop for 10 people. By the end of the year, he was confidently presenting to rooms of 50. Each leap was small, but the shift in his confidence was enormous. So how do you apply this in your own life? If networking terrifies you, don't aim to work the whole room, just introduce yourself to one person. If you want to get fit but haven't exercised in years, start with 10 push-ups or a 10-minute walk. If you dream of launching a business, begin by selling one product or service to one customer. If you want to write a book, commit to writing 1 paragraph a day instead of aiming for a chapter. The beauty of small leaps is that they don't just change your actions, they change your identity. Every time you take a manageable risk and survive it, your brain rewires a little. You start to see yourself not as someone who avoids challenges, but as someone who moves toward them. That shift in self-image is what makes bigger leaps possible later. Too often, people wait for the perfect moment to take a giant leap, not realizing that small ones are available every single day. Those small leaps are the stepping stones that carry you across the river of fear into the territory of growth. It's not about one massive act of courage. It's about 1,000 small ones, layered over time, until the life you once thought was out of reach becomes your new normal. The comfort zone isn't destroyed in one explosion. It erodes slowly, piece by piece, with every small leap you take. And if you commit to those leaps, the shifts they create will be bigger than you can imagine. Chapter 5. Fail forward, rise higher. If there's one thing that keeps people locked in the comfort zone more than anything else, it's the fear of failure. We've been conditioned to see mistakes as proof that we're not good enough, smart enough, or ready. From childhood, failure was punished, avoided, or hidden. In school, the wrong answer meant a red mark. At work, mistakes could mean lost credibility. In life, we've been taught to equate failure with shame. But here's the truth that high achievers and great innovators understand. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the pathway to it. Every breakthrough, every skill, every personal transformation is paved with missteps, wrong turns, and lessons learned the hard way. You cannot grow without getting it wrong first. Think about learning to walk. As a toddler, you didn't study walking theory for months and then stand up perfectly on your first try. You fell again and again. You stumbled, bumped, cried, and got up. The only reason you can walk today is because you failed your way into mastery. Somewhere along the way, adults forget this process and start believing that failure means stop. The most successful people have one thing in common. They fail more often than most, but they refuse to let it define them. They use failure as feedback. Every mistake is a teacher, and the lesson is priceless because it comes from direct experience. Here's why failure is your most valuable mentor. It reveals the gaps. You don't learn much when everything goes right. Mistakes show you exactly where you need to improve, what skills you lack, and what strategies don't work. It builds resilience. Each time you recover from a setback, you strengthen your ability to adapt, which is far more valuable than avoiding the setback in the first place. It forces innovation. Many breakthroughs happen because something failed. You're pushed to think differently, to find solutions you would never have considered if Plan A had worked perfectly. It strips away ego. Failure humbles you in the best way. It reminds you that growth isn't about always being right. It's about being willing to keep going until you get it right. Let me tell you about Sarah, a friend who wanted to start an online clothing brand. Her first launch? Total flop. Barely any sales. Wrong target audience. Poor marketing. Most people would have taken that as a sign to quit. Sarah didn't. She treated that launch like a classroom. She asked customers why they didn't buy, studied successful brands, adjusted her product line, and relaunched. Her second attempt? Still not perfect, but tripled the sales. By her fifth launch, she was running a profitable business. She told me, every mistake was tuition. I just had to be willing to pay for the education. That's the mindset of failing forward. You stop seeing mistakes as the end and start seeing them as part of the process. You stop asking, what if I fail? And start asking, what will I learn if I do? Here's how to practice failing forward. Redefine failure. Instead of seeing it as a verdict, see it as data. It's information you didn't have before. Recover quickly. Don't waste weeks beating yourself up. Extract the lesson, adjust, and move. Scale the risk. Take risks that stretch you but won't destroy you. This way, you can recover and apply the lesson fast. Keep perspective. A single failure doesn't define you unless you stop trying. The comfort zone thrives on perfectionism, the idea that you should only act when you're sure you can't fail. But that's a trap. Waiting for certainty means waiting forever. The people who rise higher aren't the ones who avoid falling. They're the ones who keep climbing, even with scraped knees. Failure is not your enemy. It's the hands-on coach that teaches you the lessons no book or lecture ever could. And the faster you make peace with it, the faster you'll move toward your goals. If you want a bigger life, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that includes making mistakes in public. The truth is, the people you admire have all failed more times than you've even tried. That's not an accident. That's the blueprint. Most people treat discomfort like a pothole. They swerve around it, slow down for it, or try to avoid it altogether. But here's the truth. If you want to break your comfort zone permanently, you can't just occasionally step into discomfort. You have to train yourself to live there, to use it as daily fuel. Discomfort shouldn't be an interruption in your life. It should be part of your operating system. The reason is simple. Growth doesn't live where things are easy. Every meaningful change you've ever made was uncomfortable at first. Whether it was learning a new skill, having a tough conversation, or starting over in some area of life, each one came with uncertainty, effort, and awkwardness. What separates people who grow quickly from those who stay stuck is that they stop seeing discomfort as a signal to quit and start seeing it as a signal that they're in the right place. Think of discomfort like the soreness you feel after a good workout. It's not pleasant, but it's proof that your muscles are being rebuilt stronger than before. The same principle applies to your mind and habits. Discomfort is the weight that strengthens your resilience, adaptability, and self-belief. Without it, you atrophy. So how do you train your mind to thrive outside the easy zone? Seek small daily stretches. Every day, do one thing that makes you just a little uneasy. It could be speaking up in a meeting, asking for feedback, learning a skill you're bad at, or starting a conversation with a stranger. Over time, this rewires your brain to see discomfort as normal instead of threatening. Use discomfort as a compass. When deciding between two paths, lean toward the one that scares you in a constructive way. Fear plus excitement often means growth is on the other side. Detach emotion from discomfort. Learn to feel discomfort without attaching a negative story to it. Instead of saying, "I'm anxious, something is wrong," say, "I'm anxious, this means I'm growing." Raise your threshold gradually. Just like building physical stamina, increase your capacity for discomfort in manageable increments. Too much, too fast can burn you out, but consistent exposure builds lasting resilience. A client of mine, Daniel, used to avoid any situation that made him nervous. Presentations? He passed them to colleagues. Networking events? He skipped them. Then, after realizing his career had plateaued, he committed to a discomfort habit, one small act each day that pushed him. At first, it was just saying his ideas out loud in meetings. Then, volunteering to present for 5 minutes. Then, attending events and introducing himself to 3 strangers. 6 months later, his manager noted how much his leadership presence had grown. Daniel told me, "I still get nervous, but now I see that as the sign I'm in the right place." When you make discomfort a daily practice, you stop waiting for bravery to arrive before you act. Instead, bravery becomes the byproduct of your habits. And over time, what once made you sweat becomes routine, freeing you to tackle even bigger challenges. The easy zone will always tempt you. It will whisper promises of rest and safety. But remember, comfort is not the same as peace. Real peace comes from knowing you can handle whatever life throws at you. Discomfort is the training ground for that kind of unshakable confidence. If you want to thrive beyond your comfort zone, stop treating discomfort like a problem to solve and start treating it like fuel to burn. Because the more you feed on it, the stronger, sharper, and freer you become. Chapter 7. The People Who Pull You Forward. No matter how strong your mindset, your environment will shape you more than you realize. You can be motivated, disciplined, and committed, but if you're surrounded by people who settle for less, avoid risk, and fear change, their mindset will slowly become yours. On the other hand, if you're surrounded by people who push boundaries, embrace challenges, and demand more from themselves, they will pull you forward whether you feel ready or not. Humans are social mirrors. We naturally reflect the behaviors, attitudes, and ambitions of the people we spend the most time with. If you're in a room where everyone is playing safe, you'll feel uncomfortable taking big risks. If you're in a room where growth and risk are the norm, you'll feel uncomfortable not pushing yourself. The group you belong to quietly defines your standards. There's an old saying, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. It's not about intelligence, it's about challenge. If no one around you is stretching your thinking, challenging your habits, or showing you a bigger vision of what's possible, you're in an environment that breeds stagnation. Here's why the right people are essential to breaking your comfort zone. They normalize growth. When the people around you constantly seek improvement, risk-taking becomes the default, not the exception. They expand your vision. Exposure to new ideas, achievements, and lifestyles stretches your sense of what's possible for you. They hold you accountable. When you're surrounded by people with high standards, you'll feel an unspoken pressure to rise to meet them. They offer honest feedback. The right people don't just cheer for you, they challenge you. They'll call out your excuses and push you past your self-imposed limits. Think about athletes who train together. Each person might have different strengths, but the presence of others striving at a high level forces everyone to perform better. If one athlete slows down, they'll hear footsteps behind them. If another breaks a personal record, it inspires the rest to push harder. The collective energy creates momentum that no one could generate alone. Finding people who pull you forward requires intentional effort. You might not already have them in your current circle, and that's okay. Start looking for them in professional groups, communities centered around your interests, mentorship programs, or even online spaces where growth is celebrated. The key is to be around those who live the way you aspire to live, not just talk about it. One man I worked with, Arjun, was a talented designer but felt stuck in a small local market. Most of his peers were content with modest projects and he felt guilty for wanting more. Then he joined an international design mastermind group. Within months, his standards shot up, not because they told him what to do, but because he saw what others were accomplishing daily. Within a year, he had doubled his income and landed projects he once thought were out of reach. His words still echo in my mind. I didn't just need better skills. I needed better surroundings. Here's the reality. Breaking the comfort zone is hard if you're doing it alone. But when you're surrounded by people who are already operating beyond theirs, You can't help but be pulled forward. Their courage feeds yours. Their results remind you what's possible. Their belief in you fills the gaps when your own belief wavers. You don't have to cut off everyone who isn't on the same path, but you do need to balance your circle. Spend more time with those who challenge you, and you'll find yourself naturally becoming more like them. The people you surround yourself with are either the anchors that keep you still or the wind that carries you further. Choose your wind. From survival to thriving, breaking out of your comfort zone isn't just about proving you can face challenges. It's about building a life where challenges become fuel, not threats. Too many people stop at the first stage, survival. They step into discomfort, push through fear, and endure the stress of doing something new. But the whole time, they're just trying to get through it. They're counting the minutes until things feel easy again. The real transformation happens when you move beyond survival and into thriving. Thriving means you're no longer just tolerating discomfort. You're using it as a source of energy, creativity, and personal growth. You've trained yourself to not only handle the unknown, but to seek it, because you've experienced firsthand the rewards it brings. The shift from survival to thriving happens in stages. Stage 1. Resistance. At first, discomfort feels threatening. Every fiber of your being wants to retreat to safety. You interpret the tension as danger rather than growth. Stage 2. Tolerance. You begin to endure discomfort without panicking. You can stay in it long enough to see results, but it still drains you. Stage 3. Embrace. You start recognizing discomfort as a sign you're on the right track. You lean into it willingly, knowing that growth lives there. Stage 4. Mastery. Discomfort becomes part of your identity. You've rewired your relationship with challenge to the point where you actively seek it, and thriving outside the comfort zone becomes your new normal. Moving into the thriving stage isn't about removing all fear, it's about reframing it. You no longer see fear, risk, and uncertainty as obstacles to avoid. You see them as invitations. Instead of thinking, I have to get through this, you think, I get to grow through this. That subtle mental shift changes your energy entirely. Take the example of Priya, a small business owner I coached. At first, every client rejection felt personal and discouraging. She would push through it, but barely. Her confidence took hits with each no. Over time, she began reframing each rejection as a learning opportunity. She started asking clients for honest feedback, tweaking her offers, and improving her process. Soon, she wasn't just surviving rejection, she was actively seeking it, knowing that each no got her closer to the right yes. Her revenue doubled within a year, but more importantly, her fear of failure dissolved. Thriving means you stop seeing life as something that happens to you and start seeing it as something that happens for you. Every obstacle is a tool. Every challenge is a teacher. Every discomfort is a signal that you're leveling up. To make this transition stick, integrate 3 key practices into your daily life. Reframe quickly. The moment you feel resistance, remind yourself, this is growth in progress. That simple reminder interrupts the survival mode narrative. Recover intentionally. Thriving doesn't mean never resting. It means building recovery into your rhythm so you can keep stretching without burning out. Track your wins. Document the ways discomfort has led to growth. Over time, this becomes proof that discomfort is not the enemy. It's your ally. Survival is about holding on until the storm passes. Thriving is about learning to dance in the rain, and even looking for bigger storms because you've realized they water your growth. The comfort zone will always be there, calling you back with its promises of ease. But once you've tasted the satisfaction of thriving, of becoming the kind of person who can face anything, you'll find that comfort feels too small for you. You've outgrown it. The moment you stop merely surviving and start thriving, you don't just change your results, you change your life's trajectory. From that point forward, growth isn't something you do. It's who you are. Chapter 9. Your New Normal. By now, you've stepped beyond the edges of your old comfort zone more than once in your mind, and perhaps already in your life. You've seen the cage, understood the price of staying safe, followed fear as your guide, taken small leaps, embraced failure, fueled yourself with discomfort, chosen people who pull you forward, and learned how to thrive instead of just survive. But here's the real goal: not to push your limits once in a while, but to live in such a way that growth becomes your default setting. This is what I call your new normal. Your old normal was built on familiarity. You repeated what you knew, surrounded yourself with the same environment, and avoided too much friction. It felt safe, but it quietly kept you small. Your new normal is different. It's a life where the unfamiliar is familiar, where taking action despite uncertainty is not the exception, it's the expectation. Where you don't wait for opportunities, you create them. Here's what a growth-based new normal looks like. Challenge is routine. You actively choose projects, goals, and situations that stretch you. You expect discomfort and even welcome it as a sign you're on the right track. Fear is data. You no longer interpret fear as a reason to stop, but as information to help guide your next move. Failure is feedback. Mistakes don't rattle you. They refine you. You move on faster because you've trained yourself to learn and adapt without dwelling. Your circle pulls you up. You keep relationships that challenge your thinking, encourage bold moves, and make settling feel unnatural. You self-correct. When you notice yourself slipping into old patterns, you recognize it quickly and steer back toward growth without waiting for a crisis to wake you up. The best part about making growth your default is that it compounds over time. Every action you take from this mindset builds skill, confidence, and resilience. Every challenge you embrace expands what you're capable of. And over months and years, you look back and realize you're living a life that your old self wouldn't have believed was possible. I once asked a high-performing entrepreneur what the biggest difference was between her and the version of herself from 10 years earlier. She didn't mention her revenue, her network, or her skills. She said, "Back then, growth was something I chased. Now it's something I am." That's the shift. You're no longer someone trying to leave your comfort zone. You're someone who doesn't even need one. Making growth your new normal is not about constant intensity or never resting. It's about replacing the default instinct to avoid discomfort with the instinct to engage with it. It's about building a lifestyle that naturally generates momentum, curiosity, and courage. From here on, you'll still feel fear. You'll still face uncertainty. But instead of retreating, you'll recognize those moments for what they are, opportunities disguised as tension. And you'll act. Because that's who you've trained yourself to be. The comfort zone you started with will feel like a distant memory. And every time you find yourself in a new one, you'll know exactly what to do. Step beyond it, again and again, until growth is no longer something you visit. It's where you live. Your new normal is here. Make it permanent. Chapter 10. Living Without Walls. There comes a point in this journey where the idea of a comfort zone doesn't just feel small, it feels irrelevant. You've stretched, stumbled, learned, and grown so much that the invisible walls you once believed in have lost their power. You've discovered that most of the limits you feared weren't made of concrete. They were made of perception. And perception can change. Living without walls is not about recklessness. It's not about saying yes to everything or chasing constant chaos. It's about realizing that the boundaries you thought defined your life are, in fact, movable and often imaginary. It's about choosing your path based on purpose rather than fear. In this state, your decisions are guided by clarity, not comfort. You don't ask, "Can I do this?" as much as you ask, "Does this matter to me? Does this align with my purpose?" That shift changes everything. You're no longer measuring your life by what's safe. You're measuring it by what's meaningful. When you live without walls, purpose becomes the compass. You navigate life based on what truly matters to you, even when it's hard, even when the road is unclear. Opportunities expand. Without the mental fences, You see possibilities where you once saw impossibilities. You're open to paths you didn't even know existed. Setbacks shrink in power. Because you're not confined by one rigid route, obstacles don't end your journey. They simply redirect it. You inspire others. Your courage to live this way becomes a signal to people around you that they, too, can break their own invisible walls. Life feels bigger. Every year becomes richer in experience, deeper in meaning, and more expansive in potential. I once met a woman who left a stable corporate job to start a social enterprise with no guaranteed income, no clear blueprint, and plenty of skeptics telling her she was making a mistake. 10 years later, she had built schools in multiple countries, impacted thousands of lives, and told me something I'll never forget. The scariest step was the first one, but the freest life was every step after that. That's the essence of living without walls. You accept that uncertainty will always be part of the journey, but instead of fearing it, you embrace it as proof that you're alive and engaged with your true purpose. This is where comfort is replaced with conviction, where I hope becomes I will, where every day is a chance to create, contribute, and expand the edges of what you believe is possible. The truth is, the world was never as closed off as you thought. It was only your view that was limited. Now you see the horizon for what it really is, endless, and you walk toward it with confidence, not because you know exactly where you'll end up, but because you know who you'll be when you get there, someone who refuses to be defined by walls. Step into this future boldly. You've earned it.